Hello everyone. Tonight we begin not with a legend or a war or some glamorous royal affair, but with something far more ordinary. Bread. But not just any bread. Tonight you find yourself waking up in a medieval village where every loaf could get you punished, where the crust of a poorly weighed roll might land a baker in jail. The mattress beneath you, more like a rough sack of straw that crunches every time you shift, offers little comfort, and as the early morning chill slips through the cracks in the wooden boards of your room, you pull your blanket tighter. But it's not really a blanket. It's a patched, stiff fabric that smells faintly of wet wool and wood smoke. There's no window glass, just a wooden shutter you push open with a creak that echoes too loudly in the quiet dawn. A low fog creeps across the muddy street. Somewhere nearby a chicken screeches, though whether from being stepped on, stolen or slaughtered you're not sure. Probably all three. And then you smell it. Bread. Warm, yeasty, golden bread. The kind of smell that wraps itself around your memory and makes you feel, just for a second, like the world might be kind. You follow that scent because, let's face, there's nothing better than bread in a world where most things taste like dust and despair. As you step outside, your bare feet press into the cold, moist dirt. Your toes sink slightly into mud near the water trough, where the cobbler's donkey just relieved itself. The village feels half awake, like it's hung over on fear and hunger. Down the lane you see them, villagers in line at the baker's stall, eyes locked on the loaves like hawks watching prey. The baker is sweating even though it's freezing. Why? Because here bread isn't just food, it's law, it's fear, it's survival. The crowd doesn't murmur. They just stare. You catch a glimpse of what they're all looking at. Not the bread, but the scale. A heavy iron contraption with chains and two shallow pans. The baker is weighing each loaf twice. Once before it's handed over and again, suspiciously, right after. Why twice? Well, welcome to the Middle Ages, where trust is dead, and every ounce of flour is worth more than your yearly wage. If the bread is too light, even by a sliver, it's not just the loaf that gets judged. It's the baker's soul. Bread fraud. Yes, that's a thing. Could get you whipped, pilloried, or worse, blacklisted by the guild. And in a world where most jobs are passed down and regulated like sacred rights, that's a death sentence. Now, you inch closer to the line, trying not to breathe too deeply. The mixture of soot, damp wool, and something sour coming from your neighbor's armpits makes that a challenge. Still, you're curious. You want to see what all the fear is about. The baker, an older man with sweat pooling in the creases of his neck, sets another loaf on the scale. He doesn't smile. His eyes dart toward a figure at the back. A man in furs, with a scroll in one hand and a measuring rod in the other. You don't know his name, but you know what he is. An official. A bread watcher. The sheriff of Sourdough. And as if that wasn't enough pressure, beside him stands a boy no older than 12, scribbling notes into a leather-bound book. Apprentices start young when there's bureaucracy to learn. The scale tips, just slightly. But everyone sees it. The official squints. The baker flinches, the crowd holds its breath, and for a moment time freezes. But then the boy nods, and the customer takes the bread, walking off quickly as if it might be snatched back. The baker exhales, muttering something under his breath. Something like, "Thank the saints." You inch forward. There's a part of you, and small, almost shameful, that wants to see the bread fail. Wants to see what happens when it's just a little too light. You're not proud of this, but you are curious. And in this town, curiosity is often the only thing stronger than hunger. Behind the stall you notice something odd. A second scale, smaller, hidden under cloth. The baker uses it when no one's watching. You wonder, why two? Is he checking his own work before the inspector does? Or is he hiding something worse? Historians still debate whether medieval bakers double-weighed to cheat or to survive. Some argue it was a method of fairness, ensuring quality in a system prone to corruption. Others say it was a tool of deceit, a way to make a loaf look legal even when it wasn't. But standing there in the mud, shivering slightly while the next customer steps up, you realize something. There's no such thing as a fair system. When your life depends on flour, the baker's hands tremble slightly as he places the next loaf. A murmur ripples through the crowd. It looks small, too small. You lean in, the scale tips, then bounces, settles. The boy scribbles. But the official isn't satisfied. He steps forward and lifts the loaf, cuts it in half. The inside reveals something strange. Not dough, but stuffing. Beans, dried beans. A gasp spreads through the line like fire through dry wheat. Bread mixed with filler is a crime, even if it weighs enough. The baker's face drains of color. He tries to speak, but the official raises a hand. This matter, the man says, will be taken to the guild, and just like that, the baker's day, maybe his life, is over. He bows his head. Hands shaking, he removes his apron and places it on the table. The crowd doesn't cheer, doesn't boo, just disperses, slowly. They've seen this before. They'll see it again. You don't get your bread. No one does. The stall is closed. The oven, still warm, still breathing out the promise of comfort, is silent now. As you turn to leave, you look back at the second scale. The one hidden. It's gone. Removed quickly, quietly. A secret taken with the baker. Your stomach growls, but your mind spins. Why beans? Why risk it? And most of all, why weigh the bread twice if no one trusts the weight in the first place? You step into the mud again, heart a little heavier than your stomach is full. And you know something else is coming, something deeper. Because this was just the crust. The real story lies in the rules, the laws, and the terrifying weight of the assize, but we'll get there. Right after you meet the one man who swore an oath with a baguette in hand, you return the next morning, expecting silence from the baker's stall. Perhaps a sign hung on the door reading, "Closed until forgiven by the guild," or at the very least, a few sympathetic loaves left to cool alone on a wire rack. But instead, you find someone new, someone standing tall. He wears a robe too clean for this town, cinched with a braided cord, and his boots shine like they were spit-polished with virtue. A parchment crackles in his hand, official and unmistakable. His voice, when he speaks, is like cold water on a winter morning, clear, sharp, and entirely unwelcome. "I am here," he announces, "on behalf of the Crown and the guilds of commerce, to reaffirm the sacred weight of bread." Yes, sacred, you didn't mishear, it's not a metaphor. Not in this world. Bread is sacred, flour is ritual. And this man, this self-declared truthsayer, is about to swear an oath on a loaf. The loaf in question sits before him, wrapped in linen, as if it were a holy relic. It's round, rustic, scored with a cross so deep it looks like it might bleed if touched. This, you learn, is the guild weight loafer, the standard, the alpha loaf. It is precisely 1 pound, no more, no less. The parchment he holds contains the oath, a formal vow spoken by every new assizer, the appointed bread measurer of the realm. It's full of flowery legalese, but the essence is chilling. "I swear by the scales and the salt, to weigh with fairness, to inspect with honor, and to punish with no hesitation." And as he speaks those words, his hand rests on the loaf. Not a Bible, not a sword, but bread. The ceremony is quick, efficient, uncomfortably sincere. He bows, the crowd claps, though more out of obligation than enthusiasm. But there's one part that catches your breath, the way he holds the loaf just before he sets it down. Gently, reverently, as if it were warm flesh instead of baked grain. Bread here is not just sustenance, it is law. It is a promise, and breaking. That promise, even by a hair, means chaos. You hear whispers around you. Stories about bakers who watered down their dough to stretch it further, about crusts filled with straw, about ovens confiscated by the crown. It all sounds too dramatic, but then again, yesterday's baker is gone, not fired. Gone. You inch closer to the scale again. But today, something's changed. Instead of loaves moving across the pans, there's a demonstration, a set of stones, carefully carved, each marked with its weight. A measuring rod made of brass, a parchment with a royal seal that describes, in painfully precise terms, how much a loaf of white, brown, and rye should weigh when baked in a standard oven with fuel made of peat. You almost laugh. Almost. Because the same world where men eat with their fingers and die from toothaches is also a world where bureaucrats debate crust density, and yet there's something beautiful about it. Something honest. The assizer, fresh from his oath, picks up a training loaf and sets it on the scale. It hovers, wobbles, he frowns, he tries again. Each loaf is tested, each fails. You see the problem? The loaves all look the same, but no two weigh alike. One is dense like clay, another is airy like a sponge. Same flour, same baker, different outcomes. And that, the assizer says, is why bread must be weighed twice. Once before baking, to ensure fairness at the point of preparation, and once after baking to account for natural loss, because, as he explains in surprisingly poetic terms, even bread has a soul, and it leaves something behind in the fire. A woman near you nods slowly. A man crosses himself. Someone murmurs a prayer. You're not sure if it's to God or the guild. Historians still debate whether this double weighing was truly about fairness or simply about protecting buyers in a time of scarcity and fraud. Some argue that the second weighing gave corrupt officials leverage, a way to trap bakers in impossible standards. Others believe it was a rare case of medieval consumer protection, a system where truth was measured in ounces. But all of that fades when you hear the clang. The assizer drops a loaf. The assizer. It hits the table with a thud that sounds almost final. He holds it up, too light again. He slices it open. No beans this time, no filler, just air. Innocent failure. But even that's enough. This, he declares, would be refused. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. The authority lies in the silence that follows. You feel the tension creep into your spine. Because now every baker in town has to guess, every day, how much moisture will bake out, how hot their ovens truly are, how much trust the assizer might spare. There are no digital scales, no thermometers, just instinct, just fear. You follow the assizer as he moves to another stall, a smaller bakery run by two sisters with flour-smudged faces. They look nervous, but their loaves gleam golden in the sunlight. He takes one, weighs it. Acceptable, he breaks it. Steams curls from the center like breath from a sleeping beast. He tastes it, pauses, then nods. You pass, he says, and just like that their fate is sealed, in flour, crust and sweat. It's such a small thing, a nod, a word, but in this world it's everything. You see relief in their eyes, maybe even tears. You remember your own hunger, the weight of it. How? It doesn't scream, just hums, low and constant like a headache behind your ribs. You get in line again, hoping to buy. But the sisters are cautious. They weigh every coin, every loaf, every eye glance. Trust has to be earned again. When you finally get your bread, it's warm, rough. The crust bites back. But the center is soft, comforting. And you think, maybe it was worth the ceremony. Maybe rules, even bizarre ones, are the only thing standing between you and starvation. But then you glance behind the stall. There, tucked in the shadow of a barrel, is a second scale, smaller, unmarked, and once again you wonder, why two? The day ends with the assizer packing up. He writes something in his ledger, seals it with wax, and rides off on a horse far too, clean for these roads. As the sun dips, the warmth of the bread lingers in your hands. But the unease lingers deeper, because for every loaf that passed today, how many failed yesterday, and how many will fail tomorrow? You lie awake that night, staring at the thatched ceiling, wondering what happens to the ones who get it wrong. Not the cheats, but the dreamers, the artists, the bakers who just miscalculated by a handful of air, and you drift off with one question echoing in your mind. What if justice weighs less than flour? You wake up with crumbs on your chest. Not metaphorical ones, actual scratchy, crusty crumbs stuck to your tunic like forgotten secrets. The bread from yesterday, half-eaten in a dream-soaked daze, lies next to you on the straw. You don't remember falling asleep. You only remember the heat from the hearth and the strange sensation that someone somewhere was measuring you too. Outside, the sun is already clawing its way over the thatched roofs, casting long shadows that stretch, like lazy beasts across the ground. You step outside and the cold immediately bites your ankles. The street smells like wet earth, firewood, and something else you can't name. a scent that clings to medieval towns like mildew on a damp stone wall. Uncertainty. The baker's stall is still closed. There's no sign of the assizer either. But something is posted to the side of the empty booth. A sheet of parchment, nailed at the top corners, fluttering slightly in the breeze. You lean in. It's a list. A list of acceptable bread weights updated weekly. And next to each number, a fine, nearly invisible note scrawled in ink. Subject to adjustment per oven humidity and air density. You blink. Adjustments for humidity? In a village that bathes twice a year. You run your fingers down the page. It reads less like law and more like prophecy, and in its complexity, it hides something fundamental: fear. Not of flour, not of scales, but of human error, and suddenly it hits you. This isn't just a rule, it's a trap. You follow the road toward the edge of the village, where the market bleeds into farmland. There, standing beside an ox cart, loaded with sacks of grain, is a man you've seen before but never really noticed. Thin, weather-worn, with fingernails caked in flour and a permanent white dusting on his eyebrows. He's one of the grain men. He doesn't bake, he doesn't weigh, but he holds more power than both. Barley rose this week, he says without greeting. Storms in the south, fields washed out. Could be bad for rye too. You nod like you understand, but you don't. Not really. What you do understand is that grain shortages mean higher prices, and higher prices mean bakers taking risks, risks that end with loaves being cut open in the town square like criminals on trial. Flour's tight, he continues, eyeing your feet. You're not from the guild, are you? You shake your head quickly. He seems relieved, or maybe just less annoyed. He lifts one of the sacks, lets it drop. A puff of pale dust rises, catching in your throat. You cough and he chuckles. Not unkindly. This, he says, this is where it all starts. Before ovens, before scales, before oaths. It starts here, and it always comes up light. He opens the sack to show you. Not flour, but crushed grain, rough, uneven, the kind that makes coarse bread, the kind that hurts your jaw after 3 bites. This is the poor man's flour, and even it is precious. Ever wonder why they weigh bread? Twice? He asks, not really waiting for an answer. Because no one weighs this right, and if the start's off him, the end's always worse. He gestures toward the village, the church steeple in the distance, the smell of yeast floating somewhere. Between them. You want to understand bread, he says. Forget the scales, follow the grain. And you do. You walk past barns and fields, past the old mill with its creaking wheel and haunted windows, until you find something curious. A man counting stones. Each stone is different, small, rounded, and marked. He sees you watching and holds. 1 up. Standard weights, he explains. 1 for each grain type. Different flour holds different moisture. You take one in your hand. It's surprisingly warm, sun-heated, heavy, not in grams. That hasn't been invented yet, but heavy in a way you feel. You imagine placing this next to a loaf on the scale. If the bread is too light, the stone will win. If it's too heavy, the baker will be questioned. What if the stone's wrong, you ask? The man looks up slowly. Then the world's wrong, and that's when it clicks. The bread isn't weighed twice because they don't trust the bakers. It's weighed twice because no one trusts reality. Fires burn differently in each oven. Flour dries faster in one barn than another. Bread loses moisture in the air, scales warp, stones crack, fingers cheat. And in a world where almost nothing can be counted on, the only thing left to measure is intention. You sit with that for a moment, because it's not really about the weight. It's about whether someone tried to cheat or accidentally failed. And those two things, intent and error, are what separate a baker from a thief. Back in the village, something's happening. People are gathering, not at the bakery, wound at the square. You hurry there, heart tapping against your ribs like a spoon on a kettle drum, and you see it. A trial, but not the dramatic kind. No judges in wigs, no fiery speeches. Just a baker, head bowed, and an assizer reading aloud. The loaf in question, he says, was found underweight by 2 stones and a breath. A breath. That's how finely this world calibrates its justice. The baker says nothing. His hands tremble. He's young, too young, You recognize him now, the apprentice from 3 weeks ago, the one who always whistled while shaping dough. Now he stands accused. Not of fraud, but of failure. And failure in this world is a crime. The assizer pulls something from a sack, a long wooden paddle, symbol of the guild. He taps the baker's shoulder with it, once, twice, a ritual, a rebuke. Then he turns. To the crowd, this, he says, is a warning, and just like that it's over. No jail, no stocks, just shame. Just eyes. And the unspoken understanding that one more mistake might not be so gentle. You walk home under a sky that's turning bruised and gold. The wind smells like ash and old apples. Somewhere behind you, a child laughs. Somewhere else, someone weeps. Both sound the same. And as you cross the square again, you see it, the parchment from earlier, the weights, the rules, the adjustments. Only now you notice something at the bottom. A single line, barely visible, in the same, ink but older. If in doubt, weigh again, you smile, not because it's funny, but because it's sad. Because it's the truest thing you've read all day. If in doubt, weigh again, it's not just a rule for bakers. It's a philosophy, a survival tactic, a way of life. Weigh the words before you speak. Weigh the motives before you judge. Weigh the pain before you dismiss. Weigh the loaf twice before you feed the village. And in that simple phrase, you feel something shift. Because maybe this whole strange system, with its oaths and scales and sacred loaves, isn't just about food or fraud. Maybe it's about the oldest hunger of all. The hunger to be fair. And fairness, it turns out, is heavy. Heavier than flour. Heavier than stone. Heavier than bread. You stop at the edge of the square, your fingers brushing the last crumb in your pocket. You lift it to your lips. It's dry now, brittle, but it carries weight. And as the last sunlight bleeds across the sky like yolk over fresh dough, you whisper the only question left. Who, in the end, gets to decide what enough really weighs? You wake before the sun this time. Not because of the cold or the straw poking into your ribs, though that's still there, but because of the sound. It's soft but constant, like cloth brushing against stone. You follow it to the alley, behind the bakery. There, lit by the orange flicker of a solitary lantern, is a figure hunched over a wooden table. The baker's apprentice. Not the one who was judged yesterday. He's long gone. But another. Smaller. Slower. Her hands move carefully, almost reverently, shaping dough in the quiet of dawn. You watch her tuck the corners inward, press, fold, flip. There's something soothing about it. The rhythm, the silence, the devotion. It's not just a job, it's a ritual. And suddenly you're reminded of something strange you once heard, that some monasteries considered baking a form of prayer, that every loaf could be a psalm if shaped with the right intention, but not. Here, not anymore, because this isn't a monastery. This is a market town on the edge of famine, ruled by inspectors, watched by guilds, and haunted by the ghost of yesterday's mistakes. You clear your throat gently. She startles, then relaxes. Can't sleep either, she asks, not looking up. You nod and she gestures for you to sit. There's flour on the bench and your cloak sticks to it like wax to parchment. She places a round of dough in front of you, not to eat, but to feel. It's soft, warm, alive somehow, like it's breathing. That's rye, she says. Easier, to stretch. But it dries too fast. You lose weight in the crust. She says this like someone talking about weather or sin, inevitable. You glance around. There's no scale here, no parchment. Just her and the dough and the lantern light. Why do you do it? You ask. She pauses, shrugs. Because someone has to. She doesn't mean the bread, she means the act, the hope, the belief that bread can still be made honestly in a dishonest world. And then she tells you about phantom fillers. The flour, she says, is often cut. Not just with beans like the baker before, but with things that make you blink. Powdered chalk, sawdust, even crushed bone. All mixed in when times are hard. All invisible when baked just right. You think your bread is just bread, she murmurs. But most of it's ghosts. Your stomach turns. You look again at the dough. It seems heavier now, burdened. Who does that? You whisper. She laughs. But it's not a happy sound. Everyone, she says. Eventually. She gestures toward the oven behind her, a blackened mouth carved into the wall lined with cracked stone and the memory of thousands of loaves. You bake clean for a while, but then prices rise, grain gets tight, customers stop paying, and one morning your fingers slip. A handful of filler, just to make it balance. She picks up a cloth bag and tosses it onto the table. You open it. It's full of white powder. You dip a finger in, taste. It's nothing, just dryness, dust. It's chalk, she confirms. Binds to flour, no taste, but the weight holds. You stare at her, at the calm in her voice. You use it? She doesn't answer. Instead, she asks you a question. What's worse than feeding people lies or letting them starve with truth? You don't know, and she doesn't wait for your answer. She pushes the dough aside and stands. The assizer doesn't test taste, she says, half to herself. Only wait. And with that, she disappears into the shadows. You sit there alone with the dough. And for the first time, you understand why some loaves are weighed twice, because what they carry can't always be seen. The sun begins to rise. The town stirs. You hear carts, hooves, bells. And somewhere, the chapel bell tolls 6 times. Time for market. You return to the square, and this time it's busy. Crowds, criers, children ducking under tables. But there's something new. A booth. Small. Simple. Just a crate with a cloth thrown over it. A sign hangs crookedly above it. Loaves of Truth. You approach. A young man behind the booth smiles nervously. He's got freckles, sunburnt cheeks, and eyes that dart like startled birds. We bake clean, he says. No filler, no tricks. You nod. But then you see it. A small line on the parchment beside the loaves. Loaves may be under standard weight due to lack of adulteration. He sees you reading. Swallows. We don't cheat, he says quickly, but they'll say we do. And he's right, because already the assizer is on his way. You step back as the official arrives, flanked by his usual entourage. The boy with the book, the scale bearer, the parchment clerk. He lifts a loaf, sets it on the scale. It's light, not drastically, but enough. He frowns, cuts it open. No filler, just dough. He frowns again. The freckled boy stammers, "It's clean, sir. Just flour. Honest." The assizer says nothing, but he picks up his quill, begins to write. The boy panics. "We don't cheat," he says louder now. "We just don't lie." The crowd turns, murmurs begin, and in that moment, something shifts, because now it's not about weight. It's about belief. You step closer, peer at the parchment. It reads, "Loaves found light," seller warned. "Subject to reinspection. Not punishment. Not yet. But enough to scar reputation." The boy sighs, defeated, and as you walk away, you wonder, what happens to truth when it doesn't weigh enough? You drift toward the riverbank, sit on a rock, watch the water roll by like melted silver, and you remember the apprentice's words. Most of it's ghosts. You look at the loaf in your hand. You haven't bitten it yet. You break it open. It's soft, real, pure. But as the wind stirs and a piece crumbles into the current, you can't help but ask, how long can something pure survive in a world that punishes lightness? You don't plan to go back. You've seen enough bread, enough scales, enough stone-faced officials to last a lifetime. But something pulls you in again. Something soft but heavy, like a memory that doesn't belong to you. You follow the smell. It's richer today, toastier, a deeper, more ancient aroma, the kind that feels like it's been baking since before memory. And when you reach the market square, you see the sign that no one really explains, but everyone respects. The baker's dozen. 12 loaves for the price of 12. And one more, sounded for luck, or fear. The phrase floats in your mind like steam from an oven. You've heard it before. Whispers from your childhood. A baker's dozen is 13. But never why. Until now. The booth is run by a man whose apron is older than most buildings in town. His hands are thick, cracked, the kind of hands that only know flour, fire, and fear. He doesn't speak much. Just gestures to the sign, then to the loaves, and finally to the bundle wrapped in coarse linen. The 13th. You ask him. You ask why. And at first, he shrugs, as if it's obvious. But then he leans in, as if he's about to share a secret. So old it no longer belongs to anyone. The 13th loaf, he says, isn't generosity, it's insurance. You blink. He continues, "In the old days, if you shorted a customer, even by a finger's width, you paid, not in coin, for in reputation, in lashes, in blood. So to be safe, we added one, always, no matter what. You glance at the loaves. They look perfect, identical, uniform. But beneath the crust you begin to see it, the weight of fear baked into tradition. Sometimes, the baker says, the 13th was better than the rest. Sometimes it was worse. But it was always there." He wraps your loaf, tucks the bonus underneath and hands it to you. The bread is warm, the weight of it comforting. But the story, the reason, stays with you longer. As you walk, you start to notice it everywhere. That number. 13. A baker at the edge of town drops 13 loaves on a tray. A child skips rope, counting to 13 before stopping. Even the church bell, when it tolls for the end of market, rings 13 times. Superstition? Maybe. But also remembrance. Because long ago, in another village not unlike yours, a baker was caught cheating. Not with chalk, not with beans, just mismeasured flour. It was an honest mistake. But it cost lives because the bread went moldy, the sick ate it, and the rumor spread like rats in grain. The guild punished him, harshly, publicly. And from that day on, bakers swore they'd never come up short again. Not for silver, not for silence, not for fear. So they gave more, always more. One loaf extra, one final breath of goodwill, hot from the oven. But generosity here is just fear in disguise. The sun rises higher. You pass a group of children playing with a scale. It's makeshift, just a stick, a stone, and some string. But they mimic what they've seen, weighing pebbles, comparing them, pretending one is guilty and the other honest. They laugh. But it's hollow, because even in play, they understand. The world doesn't trust what it cannot measure. You ask an older woman nearby about the game. She's selling boiled eggs and looks like she's carved from the same wood as her cart. That's how it starts, she says. Weighing pretend things, then real ones, then people. You try to laugh. But she doesn't. "I remember," she continues, "when my uncle was a baker during the drought. No flour for days, he baked with acorns and prayer, still gave 13, always." You tilt your head. Why not stop? She looks away. Because once they expect more, they never forgive less. That sentence stays with you as you sit by the river again. The water's lower now, the stones more exposed. You throw the 13th loaf in your hand from palm to palm, feeling its weight, wondering how many hands shaped it, how many ghosts it carries. And then you tear a piece off. Inside it's different. Softer, slightly sweeter. A mistake, a gift, or just a test. You eat it anyway, because even fear tastes good when warm. The next day, you return to the same baker. He's gone. No stall, no loaves, just an empty space where he once stood, and a scattering of crumbs that pigeons fight over like they know the story too. You ask around. No one knows what happened, or maybe no one's willing to say. The guilds are quiet today. The scales untouched. But later, tucked behind the chapel wall, you find it. A parchment nailed to the stone. Guild violation, excess distribution beyond standard, unauthorized weights reported, license revoked. Your heart stutters. He gave too much, that was his crime. Not cheating, not cutting. Not lying, giving, and it wasn't allowed. You sit there for hours tracing the parchment with your fingers. It feels like sandpaper, sharp, dry, final. The wind picks up, carries the scent of smoke. Someone's baking nearby. Life moves on. It always does, but you sit and wonder, what kind of world punishes abundance? What kind of justice prefers precision over mercy? You rise eventually, step away. But the parchment still clings to your mind like ash after fire. That night as you try to sleep, you hear it again. That phrase, a baker's dozen. And now you understand it not as kindness, not even as habit, but as survival. A whisper from history. A shield against systems that punish the generous. You turn over and through the cracks in the shutter you see the stars. Scattered, uneven, imperfect. And still, somehow, they hold the sky together. You close your eyes and think, Maybe one day, we'll stop measuring worth in weight, but until then we bake 13. The next morning arrives with an unfamiliar silence. No bells, no cries of fishwives, no thud of hooves in the alley. Even the roosters seem hesitant. You open your door and immediately notice it. The square is empty. No bread stalls, no scales, no guild officials pacing with their scrolls. Just rows of shuttered booths and a strange quiet that hums in your ears like a held breath. You move cautiously through the stillness. The ground is damp, as if it rained during the night, but the sky is dry, heavy. The air carries the distinct scent of scorched grain, sharp, burnt, almost bitter, and beneath it a murmur of something darker. Fear. On the steps of the chapel, someone has placed a loaf, alone, no note, no wrapping. Just a simple round of bread, dusted in ash, sitting like an offering or a warning. You don't touch it. Instead, you follow the scent, the scorched one, through the winding lanes to the southern edge of town, where the older ovens are. One's built into stone walls long before anyone here was born. And there you find it, the bakery, burned, not just the roof, everything. Blackened beams, collapsed walls, the ovens, cracked wide like dry mouths. And inside, amid the ashes, you see what's left of a scale, warped, melted, still bound to the stone by a chain. Someone tried to weigh something that couldn't hold. You ask around, whispers only. The story is unclear. Some say it was arson. Others blame lightning. But one thing is constant. No one says the baker's name, not aloud, as if it might summon the fire back. But later, as you sit by the ruins, someone does speak. An old man, wrinkled like aged leather, with eyes like wet coal. He sits beside you without greeting, pulls a crust of bread from his coat, chews, swallows. You know what happens when you burn a scale, he asks. You shake your head. Nothing, he says, because the weight still exists. You just can't measure it anymore. You don't know what to say. He doesn't wait. Justice isn't in the metal. It's in the memory. He tosses the crust into the ash and leaves, and you sit there long after he's gone thinking about how something as solid as iron could melt, while something as invisible as memory doesn't even crack. That night, the wind howls like it's remembering every loaf that was ever mismeasured, and you dream. You dream of a long table stretching into darkness, each seat filled with a baker, all silent, all watching a single loaf at the center. It glows softly, like a coal, like judgment. You wake with the image burning behind your eyes. When you step into the square the next morning, it's back to normal, almost. The stalls are open, the bells are ringing, but something's changed. There are new posters, not parchments, posters, colored ink, bold type. A new thing for this old world. They read, "Public weighings twice daily, all loaves subject to inspection." Beneath it, failure to comply. Fines, confiscation, or banishment. And at the bottom, by order of the crown and the Guild of Bakers. You feel it, the tension, the panic wrapped in parchment, the way fear always comes dressed as order. You walk toward the booth of the boy with freckles, the one who tried to sell honest loaves. He's not there. His stall is boarded shut. In his place stands a woman you don't recognize. Stern eyes, hard hands. She doesn't speak as she weighs each loaf with military precision. Someone whispers that she's a guild appointee, a compliance baker. A baker who no longer bakes, she just weighs. And you realize in that moment that something has snapped, because bread is no longer nourishment. It's evidence. And bakers are no longer craftsmen. They're suspects. At the edge of the square you find a new kind of crowd, not customers, but watchers. Not buyers, but believers in the system. People who cheer when a loaf fails inspection, who nod approvingly when a fine is issued. You hear one say, "At least now we know what's fair." But you wonder, do they? Or do they just think they do? You follow the inspections for hours. Some loaves pass, most do not. Each time a loaf fails, it's tossed into a bin marked unfit. You peer inside. Dozens of loaves, some crushed, some whole. All still warm, and you realize no one's eating them. You ask a guard what happens to the discarded bread. He shrugs. Animals, maybe, or burn it. Burn bread. While people are hungry, you step away. Sick. Later, near the edge of the market, you see a child barefoot watching the bin. She waits until no one is looking, then darts forward, grabs a failed loaf and vanishes into an alley. You smile. Not because of the theft, because someone somewhere still remembers that bread is for eating, but as you turn, you hear it. The soft clink of metal. The compliance baker has seen the girl, and she's making a note in her book. You don't sleep well that night. In your dreams, the loaves speak, not with words, but with weight. Each one placed on a scale, each one whispering. A different truth. I was baked with fear. I was shaped with guilt. I was meant to nourish, but I was judged instead. And in the center again, that 13th loaf, glowing, untouched, heavy with something no one dares name. When you wake, you find yourself whispering, "What? If the thing we're weighing isn't the bread, but ourselves?" You don't go to the market the next day, you go to the river, and in your pocket, one last loaf, the kind that would fail inspection. Misshapen, slightly underweight, no filler, just honest failure. You sit by the water, tear it open. It smells like childhood, like trust, like mornings before rules. And as you eat, you realize the truth. We don't weigh bread twice because we need to. We weigh it twice because we've forgotten how to believe once. There's a new face in town. He arrives on a polished horse, wearing boots that have never seen mud and gloves made for pointing, not baking. The crowd parts without being told. Something in his silence demands it. His eyes scan the square like a scale in human form, measuring everything, everyone. They say he's a higher sizer. A rare title, appointed not just by the guild but by the crown itself. That alone makes people uneasy. He doesn't speak at first. He just walks the perimeter of the market, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the scales, the stalls, the loaves. The regular assizer, the one with the boy and the ledger, steps aside without protest. And just like that, the rules change again. No one's sure what the high assizer is here to do. Some say he's come to audit the auditors. Others say he's hunting for a baker who's been too generous, too clean. But rumors in this town move faster than flour on wind, and today they swirl like a storm. You keep your distance, but your ears are open. Later, near the chapel wall, you overhear a pair of merchants whispering. Remember the town of Eldrith, one says. Had a high assizer just like him. 3 bakers vanished. Said it was excess weight discrepancy. Whatever that means. The other scoffs. Means they baked with mercy. Got judged by math. You step away before they notice you listening, but the phrase clings to your skin like flour, judged by math. It's late afternoon when the high assizer finally speaks. He climbs the steps near the central scale, the one that's chained to the stone, immovable, eternal. The crowd gathers instinctively, you among them. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. Bread, he begins, is the measure of a people. The silence deepens. When it is too heavy, it is wasteful. When it is too light, it is dishonest. And when it is unweighed, he lets the sentence hang. It is chaos. He pauses, turns, gestures to the young compliance baker, the one who replaced the boy with freckles. She will now oversee all public waitings, twice per day. Loaves must meet not only the guild standard, but the crown's. Margin. That word, margin, spreads like cold water through the crowd. It's new. No one knows what it means yet, but it sounds small, sharp, unforgiving. The high assizer steps down, doesn't look back. His guards follow. The crowd begins to dissolve, but not with relief, with a low, growing dread. You turn to an old baker nearby, the one with the hands, like knots and the eyes like dust. What's the crown's margin, you ask? He chuckles. But it's not a sound of humor. It's the kind of chuckle you make at a joke you're too tired to cry about. It means, he says, that even perfection might be punished. You don't sleep that night. You lie awake hearing the creak of the windmill outside, the distant bark of a dog, the sound of your own breathing as steady as an oven ticking down, and beneath it all, the memory of the high assizer's voice. When it is unweighed, it is chaos. In the morning, the change is visible, not just in the square, so in the faces. The eyes of the bakers are red, not from flour, from fear. They bake slower. Measure more. Triple-check their weights. The 13th loaf is gone now, too risky, too suspicious, and something else has vanished too. The smile. Even the apprentice girl, the one who used to hum while shaping dough, works in silence now. Her hands still knead with skill, but her shoulders curve inward as if expecting punishment. You stand in line. When your turn comes, she doesn't meet your eyes. She hands you the loaf wrapped tight as though ashamed. You take it. Say thank you. She flinches. As you walk away, you unwrap the bread. It's perfect. Golden crust, even shape, warm center, and yet it feels wrong, because you know what it took to make it. Not just grain and water, but fear, silence, surrender, and still, despite the perfection, you see her watching the scale, just in case it wasn't enough. Later that afternoon, you visit the public weighing. It's worse than you imagined. The loaves are placed on the scale by forceps now, no touching. Each one must fall within a razor-thin range. Too much and it's confiscated. Too little and it's recorded. Twice. And the higher sizer watches each one, eyes unblinking, judgment without breath. When one fails, the crowd doesn't gasp anymore. They just look away. You see a child cry when her mother's bread is taken, not for being light, but for being too full, too generous, too much, and you want to scream. But no one else does. So you don't. Instead you walk, past the square, past the chapel, past the river, into the forest, where the laws don't follow. There, beneath the trees, you meet an old woman kneeling by a fire. She's baking flatbread on a stone. No oven, no scale, just instinct. You sit. She doesn't ask why you're there. She doesn't speak at all. She flips the bread, tears off a piece, hands it to you. It's hot, smoky, slightly burned, but real. And for the first time in days, you feel your throat unclench. You eat. When you're done, she finally speaks. Bread, she says, is supposed to be imperfect. You nod. She nods back. Then she says something you'll never forget. We weigh bread now because we no longer know how to trust taste. You leave a coin on the rock. She doesn't touch it. You walk back through the forest, feeling something heavy in your chest, but it's not sadness. It's a question, one that won't leave you. What happens to a society when mercy itself becomes a crime? You return to town with the taste of ash and earth still on your tongue, but something inside you feels steadier, like a stone that has finally settled into the bottom of a river. You've eaten bread that was imperfect, handmade, real, and now everything in the square feels too clean, too symmetrical, too controlled. You walk slowly. People pass by quickly now, heads low, baskets tucked tight to their chests, as if even their hunger might be measured and fined. You notice the signs have changed again. The bold lettering is the same, but the message is more specific now. Bread must be weighed publicly. Third-party inspection. Optional, but encouraged. Optional, but encouraged. That's how it starts. You find yourself outside the apprentice's stall again. She's there, hands dusted with flour, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She doesn't look up as you approach. Only when you place the coin gently on the table, she doesn't smile. Not exactly. But her shoulders lift just slightly, like someone remembering how to breathe. As she wraps your loaf, you notice something strange, a new tool beside the dough. Not a knife, not a scale, a small brush. What's that for? You ask. She hesitates, then answers quietly, for brushing away excess flour. It adds weight if left on. You stare at her, the brush, the logic, but flour is still flour, she nods. Yes, but they count only baked weight now. Everything else is noise. Everything else is noise. That phrase sticks in your chest, like a splinter. You walk away slowly, loaf in hand, but stop when you hear footsteps. Fast, urgent, coming down the lane. A boy, dirty face, eyes wide with panic. They're at the mill, he says, breathless, measuring flour now. You blink. Not just bread. He shakes his head. Flour. Raw. Before baking. Before water. Before salt. You follow him. The mill sits at the edge of town, crouched beside the river like a tired old beast. Its wheel creaks slowly, rhythmically, as the water pushes it along. Inside, everything smells of dust and grain and something else. Something more acrid, like rust or regret. And there they are, officials, the higher sizes men, holding sieves, dipping scoops into sacks of flour, pouring them onto scales, scribbling into books with ink too dark to be anything but judgment. You watch, in silence, as one sack is declared in excess. Not because of weight, but density. They accuse the miller of adding filler. Bran, maybe, or chalk, it doesn't matter. The verdict is already inked. He protests. Of course he does. It's sifted less, he says, voice trembling. Whole. It's grain, it's better flour. But better isn't allowed, not anymore. They mark the sack. Not with a fine, but with a brand. A red symbol that means unverified, which is as good as unclean. The miller slumps. Not just because of the loss, but because he knows what comes next. No baker will dare buy flour marked like that. His business is done. Quietly, legally, permanently. You step outside before they see you because the wind has shifted. And now even truth has weight. Back in the square, you sit near the edge of the public bin, the one marked unfit. Inside, more loaves than ever. Piled high, all warm, all beautiful. You watch, like always, as one or two children sneak closer. But now they're chased off. A guard with a stick. Property of the guild, he growls. Property. You look at the bread. Then at the people passing by, hungry, thin, silent, and then it hits you they're afraid to eat, because if they eat unverified bread, they're guilty too. Guilt by consumption. You walk, not quickly, just far enough to feel the edges of the town blur, past the last houses, past the fence into the wild grass. There you tear your loaf in half. The inside is soft, steam rising like a final breath. You eat slowly, and with each bite, you feel the truth rise inside you like heat. This isn't about bread anymore. It's about power, control, the ability to decide who gets to nourish and who gets to starve. You think of the apprentice's brush, the flour at the mill, the branded sacks. You remember the baker who vanished for giving too much. You remember the loaf placed on the chapel steps, and then you remember the old woman in the woods. Bread is supposed to be imperfect. That night, you don't dream of scales. You dream of hands, dozens of them, reaching, shaping, giving, and each time a loaf is placed in an oven, you hear a whisper. This was for someone, but when the oven opens, the bread is gone. In its place, nothing. Just heat and silence. When you wake, the smell of burning hangs in the air again, but it's not from fire, it's from fatigue, from pressure, from lives being ground down into dust. You go to the square once more, but not to buy, to watch. The higher sizer is there, always now, like a statue that breathes. A boy approaches with, say, a small loaf, offers it with trembling hands. The assizer takes it, weighs, it passes. Then he does something unexpected. He breaks the bread, not to check for filler, to eat. A single bite, slow, thoughtful. The square holds its breath. He chews. Then looks up and says, "Too soft," and discards it, not for being light, not for being wrong, just for not feeling right. The bin accepts another offering, and the crowd moves on, but you don't. You stay, because something in that moment reveals the final truth. They're not measuring for justice. They're measuring for control disguised as taste. You step back, away from the square into shadow, and there, with your last coin, you make a vow. Tomorrow you won't buy. You'll bake, and you'll do it without scales, without fear, without silence. Because somewhere, someone has to remember. Bread isn't about numbers, it's about need. The oven is ancient. It crouches at the far edge of town like an animal that remembers things better left forgotten. Built into the base of a collapsed mill, its stones are soot-blackened and cracked from years of flame and silence. You found it 3 days ago while following the scent of elderflower through overgrown brush, and though the roof above it is long gone, the hearth still holds heat. You've gathered wood, stolen flour, hidden water in skins beneath your cloak, not much. Enough for one batch, enough to try, because today you bake, not for trade, not for weight, not for approval. You bake because bread is supposed to be shared, not certified. The Fire takes longer than you'd hoped. The kindling is damp and the wind is cruel. You hunch close, smoke in your eyes, tears sliding down your cheeks, not from grief, not yet, but from effort. Your hands tremble as you mix. You don't measure. There's no scale here, only instinct, memory, hunger. The dough comes together, slowly, sticky, uneven, stubborn, like people. You knead it with the heel of your palm over and over until your wrists ache. The sun arcs overhead, the birds quiet. The fire glows red behind you. You shape the loaves, not round, not perfect, just enough. When the first one goes in, it's like sending a secret into the mouth of a beast. And when it comes out, blistered, browned, misshapen, you don't smile. You breathe, because it's real, because it's yours. You let the rest bake slowly. Some char, some collapse. One splits down the center like it's exhaling something long held. You don't care. Each loaf is placed in a linen cloth, and at twilight, you walk through the alleyways, past the guards, to the edges of the market, and you leave them. Not for sale. Not with signs, just there, one by one, placed like offerings beneath windows on steps by empty bowls. No one sees you, or so you think. But as you turn to leave, you hear it. A soft whisper. Thank you. You freeze. Look back. A boy, and no older than 6, stands barefoot in the doorway of a half-burned house, clutching one of your loaves like it might disappear. You don't speak, neither does he, but in his eyes you see something you haven't seen in weeks. Trust. You vanish before the guards come. The next day the town murmurs. Quiet talk, shifts in tone. Someone left unmarked bread. Some say it's a trap. Some say it's blessed. Others claim it tasted better than any guild approved. Loaf in months, but no one admits to eating it, and no one dares ask for more. Still, they watch the alleyways now. The corners, the shadows, they wait. And that night you bake again. This time you leave fewer. Not from scarcity, from caution. Because something has changed. Not in you, in them. And when the higher sizer hears, he doesn't rage. He smiles. Because he knows. Unauthorized nourishment is the most dangerous rebellion of all. Within days, new posters go up. All loaves must be registered before distribution. Unauthorized baking will be treated as sedition. Eating unmarked bread may result in loss of ration privileges. Eating, not baking, not selling, just eating. You retreat to the forest oven, move deeper, cover the path, bury the coals. But they still come. Not guards. People, a woman with twins, a man missing fingers, an elder who speaks only in whistles. They don't beg, they don't barter, they just sit, watch, wait. You feed them, slowly, carefully. Sometimes you bake enough for 10, sometimes only for 1, but each time you need a little longer. Let the dough rest a little more. Shape it with open hands, not clenched fists. Because now every loaf is a statement. One night, the apprentice appears. She doesn't speak at first, just places a small bundle beside your flour. You unwrap it. Salt, wrapped in cloth. Stolen from a guild ration. Risking everything. You look up. She nods once and leaves. You don't follow. The next morning you hear that her stall was raided. Nothing left but broken scales. You bake with the salt anyway. The bread is better, richer, alive. And when the next family arrives, tired, silent, bone-thin, you offer it freely. They weep, you don't, because someone has to stay dry when the world forgets how to cry. Word spreads. Slowly. Not in words. In gestures. In footprints near the oven. In half-buried baskets returned with seeds. In cloth scraps tied to trees. You're no longer a baker. You're a myth, a whisper, a possibility. And still, the town pretends nothing's wrong. Public weighings. Continue, loaves are rejected. The unfit bins overflow and still people starve. One day a loaf appears on your stone oven. You didn't bake it, you don't recognize it, but it's wrapped in linen and marked with a single word scratched in ash. Enough. You cut it open. Inside is clean bread. Pure. Hand-shaped. You don't know who baked it, but you smile, because it's begun. Not a revolt, a restoration. Of balance, of trust, of the belief that bread belongs to all. And as the fire crackles low, and the forest leans in closer, and the night breathes through the branches, you say aloud the thing you've always felt. We don't weigh bread to measure its worth. We weigh it because we forgot how to feel it. The forest has become a village of silence. They arrive before dawn now. In twos, threes, whole families moving like shadows, careful not to snap a twig or disturb the leaves. No one speaks above a whisper. Even laughter is rare. But when it happens, it's sacred, like bread. You knead in rhythm now, not out of duty, out of something deeper. Reverence, maybe, or resistance. It's hard to tell them apart anymore. The loaves have changed. They're rounder now, simpler, each one touched by different hands. Sometimes you wake to find dough already rising by the oven, marked with initials, with braids, with pressed leaves or tiny pebbles that bake into the crust as signatures. It's not just your fire anymore, it's theirs. You've become something between baker and witness, shaping not just food, but memory. Some loaves go to children. Others are placed under floorboards. One is buried carefully with a ribbon and a prayer. No one asks you to explain. Because in this world, bread says enough. But peace doesn't last long. Word reaches the guild. A trail found. A footprint mistaken. A single crust left behind. They send riders, not assizers, not inspectors. Soldiers. Uniforms where aprons should be. Blades where brushes once were. They ride with torches and scrolls bearing the seal of the crown. You see, them from the hilltop. Their arrival is quiet, almost theatrical, as if even they know what they represent. Order, yes, but also the failure of something older, something sacred. The first oven they find is the old one near the chapel. Abandoned, cold, but its stones still smell of rye and rebellion. They smash it anyway. The second is yours. By the time they reach it, you've scattered the ashes, buried the flour, hid the last loaf in a hollow tree where a child can find it later. You stay nearby, hidden in the brush. You watch as they break it open, stone by stone. Their boots crush crusts. Their laughter is forced, hollow, because they don't find you, or the others because the others are everywhere now. The apprentice? Gone. Some say she crossed the river. Others say she runs a mill of her own now, flour without fear. The freckled boy? Rumored to bake near the sea using salt like gold, shaping loaves that sing when cracked. Even the higher sizer has changed. No longer in the square. Replaced by another, quieter, less visible, as if even power feels ashamed now. But you don't. Go back. You stay in the woods. You build a new oven, smaller, deeper, hidden beneath rocks and moss and thyme. You bake again. Not every day. Not for everyone. Just enough. And one night, in a fog so thick it feels like breath, you leave a single loaf in the center of the square. No note, no weight, no explanation, just the bread, still warm. By morning, it's gone, and in its place, a second loaf, then a third, then a dozen, unmarked, unmeasured, unafraid. And though no one says the word, you all feel it. Return, not of a person, of a practice, of a truth. That bread, like people, doesn't need to be perfect to be precious. You sit one last time by the oven. The fire is low. The sky is soft. The world feel possible again. And as the dough rises beside you, shaped not by rules but by hope, you whisper the oldest recipe of all: flour, water, hands, fire, trust. Then you close your eyes and let it bake. And now, as the last embers glow beneath the stones and the forest returns to stillness, you feel it settle around you, the weight, the warmth, the quiet. You've traveled far tonight, even if your feet never moved. Through markets and ovens, whispers and flames, injustice and generosity, you've seen how even the softest thing, a loaf of bread, can become a weapon or a prayer. You've felt the difference between nourishment and inspection, between survival and surveillance, and you've learned, perhaps more than anything, that what we weigh reveals far less than why we weigh it. The loaves in the end weren't about flour, they were about mercy, the hands that shaped them, about memory, and the scales, They never measured worth. Only fear. So as you rest now, blanket over your chest, eyelids heavy, the soft hum of the fan or wind or night all around you, let go of the measurements. Let go of the margins. Let go of the need to be perfect, to be certified, to be approved. You are not a loaf. You are not meant to be weighed twice. You are meant to be shared, to rise, to warm the world. Now, slow your breathing. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Feel the calm returning like steam from a fresh loaf cracked. Open at dawn and sleep, knowing that somewhere, even now, someone is baking something for someone else just because they can.